Hi, I'm Andy with EcoCha, and here we are with batch number 26 of the EcoCha Tea Club. And this year's January 18 batch of tea is from the same farm and the same farmer as our second batch of tea that we shared with the EcoCha Tea Club in January 16. And we've named this batch of tea a Dong Ding Tie Guan Yin Oolong. And this name would probably be chuckled at by the locals here in the industry and traditionalists, simply because it's a combination of two very distinct types of traditionally made oolong tea here in Taiwan. So, in short, these tea leaves were picked from the Tie Guan Yin strain of tea plant, but this plot of tea was planted and has been harvested for the last several years in the heart of Dong Ding Oolong Tea country in Lugu Township in Nantou County. Traditionally in Taiwan, Tie Guan Yin has been cultivated in northern Taiwan in Taipei in a small tea growing region called Muzha. An elder artisan that we befriended many years ago decided to plant a plot of these Tie Guan Yin tea plants in his backyard, basically, which is the spot where his family has been growing tea for probably about 100 years, and he himself has been cultivating tea for 60 odd years. He's 80 years old now. And we were really excited when we found out that he was cultivating Tie Guan Yin tea plants, and particularly excited when we sourced our first batch 2 years ago. That first batch he made very similarly to contemporary Dong Ding Oolong tea, in the sense that the oxidation level was about the same as a Dong Ding and the roasting level was basically the same. This year's winter harvest was made in a way that is somewhat similar to that original batch, but also distinctly different. Basically, it's different in the level of oxidation and the level of roasting. This batch is more oxidized and less roasted than that initial batch that we shared with our EcoCha Tea Club in January 16. By the way, in terms of a brewing tip, I just weighed out about 9 grams of tea for a 150 milliliter teapot. That's a little bit higher than normal, but within the range of high mountain teas. This tea, the farm is at about 700 meters, so it's a mid-elevation farm. I would say this batch of tea is made in the fashion that he made before Dong Ding Oolong was standardized as a commercial product some 35 years ago. This tea, in my perception, is closer to a Hong Shui Oolong, in that the leaves were oxidized maybe 50%, considerably more than a contemporary Dong Ding Oolong tea, and Mr. Su only roasted them once. So it's a medium, relatively heavy oxidation of the leaves and a light roasting, which is very similar. These leaves are less oxidized than a Hong Shui Oolong would be. It's made in the fashion of a traditional Dong Ding Oolong tea, or in the fashion that Mr. Su learned as a young man. And that alone excites us, and in addition to this, the actual flavor profile of this tea, the quality of the tea, it has a particularly sweet quality. These leaves, by weight, you can use a little bit more, and particularly visually, you can use more tea leaves because the leaves were rolled relatively loosely, and this is also a representative factor in traditionally made tea. Modern Taiwanese oolongs are rolled very tightly, and for practical purposes, they tightly rolled tea leaves will be much less prone to crumbling, and they will package smaller, so it's easy to package and ship, and it maintains freshness. So if they're minimally oxidized, unroasted teas, such as High Mountain tea, this is the way to do it. Because before this modern generation of tea production, there weren't these machines that could roll the leaves tightly. Along with that, there was also a traditional wisdom in the extent that the leaves were rolled. The leaves were rolled enough to keep their integrity and protect them sufficiently from crumbling, but loosely enough to allow them to age well. Aged tea leaves are assessed by the appearance of them, and one of the factors in the appearance of them is how tightly rolled they are. If they're tightly rolled, they're probably not that old, less than 20 years old. If they're loosely rolled, they're most likely more than 20 and can be 30 or 40 years old due to the pre-modern tea production methods that were used at those times. Now, Mr. Su decided to replicate that and not use the modern machinery to produce this batch of tea, but to make it like the batches of tea that he made before he had those modern machines. And again, this is one of the special aspects of procuring a batch of tea here in the 21st century that was made in the likes of a batch of tea some 2 generations ago, perhaps. A ripe fruit, or perhaps even a preserved fruit flavor, a little bit of nuttiness in there, some woody tones. Very balanced, very sweet, almost zero astringency or bitterness, but still maintains a complexity that makes it very interesting. It's just yummy. It has enough, just a hint of astringency to make it a clean finish, but it has nothing in terms of the drying. It's not too dry on the palate. Experiment with the concentration of the leaves. Start with less leaves and find that spot where you just think that it has a fullness of flavor but maintains that sweetness and also the aromatic complexity. What happens when you use too many leaves is the complexity will be overridden by the more bold flavors in the tea, and you might just get a more monotone. When you hit it just right, where the tea is strong enough, it's brewed to a significant enough concentration where it has enough body, but there's still a lot of complexity in the nose. That's when you're getting the fullest effect from your brew. So there we have it, our second time sharing this unique batch of tea made by an elder artisan in the historical Dong Ding Oolong Tea producing region. He decided at 70 some odd years old to plant a crop of Tie Guan Yin tea plants that are traditionally from northern Taiwan in order to have something interesting, something distinctive, and we're inspired by Mr. Su in this respect. He continues to explore and to experiment in his tea making practice and expertise to provide batches of tea that have so much behind them, so much has gone into them, basically 60 years of continuous experience of tea making. And we're going to continue to visit Mr. Su on a regular basis and find that batch of tea where we feel we must share with our EcoCha Tea Club members. Thanks for being with us, and please let us know what you think about this tea. Share your tasting notes in the comments on our blogs, or your photos of your tea setups and your tasting videos. We'd love to see them and hear your experience. The Tea Club is about creating community that we can share our experiences and learn from each other with. Please stay with us to see what we have upcoming for the celebration of Chinese New Year next month. Thanks.